Okay, this video is meant to serve as a review for your Chapter 8 test corrections. We're going to start with an example problem from 8.5 where we're factoring a quadratic trinomial where a equals 1. That leading coefficient is 1. For this problem, all we need to do is factor c. We remember that c is a product and that b is a sum or a combination. So we need to factor c, factor that product of 15. We get 1 and 15, 3 and 5. And then we need to find b. We need to find what combination of those factors is going to give us our b value, which for this one is 2. So I have 1 and 15, that's not going to give me 2. But 3 and 5 will combine to give me 2. And I have to watch the signs, because I see that my c value, 15, is negative, which means my product is negative, which means that one of my factors is going to have to be positive and one is going to have to be negative. Since I want a positive 2 in the middle, I'm going to choose the 5 to be positive and the 3 to be negative. So my binomial is x minus 3, and my other binomial is x plus 5. That is your final answer. If you redouble distribute those to check your work, you will end up with your original trinomial, x squared plus 2x minus 15. Okay, our next one is from a 6 where we're factoring a quadratic trinomial that a has a value greater than 1. So here we have 5 in the a place, 11 is our b, and our c is 2. So the first thing we always ask ourselves here, is there any greatest common factor? Can I factor anything out from the whole thing before I start? The answer for this one is no. So then I multiply a times c. I can't just factor c here because a is greater than 1. So I'm going to go 5 times 2 and get 10. And I'm going to factor that 10. I have 1 and 10, 2 and 5. Now I have to choose which of those combinations I'm going to use. And I'm going to use 1 and 10 because that's what's going to give me my 11. My c value is positive here, so I get to add them together to get that 11. And 1 plus 10 will give me 11. So now I do what we call split the middle. Remember, we rewrite our trinomial, but instead of 3 terms, we're going to write it in 4 terms. The first term, 5x squared, stays the same. The last term, 2, stays the same. But I split that 11x into 1x and 10x. Then I group those 4 terms into 2 groups of 2. And I factor out from each one. So the 5x squared plus 1x, the greatest common factor there is x. I take that out. I'm left with 5x plus 1. The second group of 2 is 10x plus 2. I factor out a 2 from there, and I'm left with 5x plus 1. Remember, I have to end up with the same repeating binomial with that second group as I got from the first one. So I got that 5x plus 1 the first one. I have to get 5x plus 1 from the second one. So then my final answer is that repeating binomial, 5x plus 1. We only use it once. And then what's left over? X plus 2 is the other binomial that we factored out. So that's my second binomial. So there's my final answer. Our third example is also from 8.6 where we're factoring where a is greater than 1. This one, however, does have a greatest common factor that needs to come out first. So 12p squared plus 20p minus 8, it has a greatest common factor of 4. I take that 4 out and I rewrite my quadratic trinomial without that greatest common factor in it. You have to rewrite it so that you know what you're going to factor. You're done with that 4 now, so I want you to put it on your answer line right now, okay, so that you're done with it, but it ends up in your final answer and you don't forget about it. Now we're left with what we just had here. We're going to split the middle. So we're going to multiply a times c, 3 times 2, get 6. And I'm going to choose 6 and 1 here for my b, which is 5. Now, How did I know to choose 6 and 1? Because 2 and 3 gives me 5 also. So I have to look at my C. And because my C is negative, I know I have to take the difference between these two factors to get my B. And I want my B to be positive 5. So I'm going to use positive 6 and I'm going to use negative 1. Okay? You've got to watch your signs. You've got to see what your C is. My C is negative, which means my product is negative. I have to have one of each, a positive and a negative. So I split the middle, I rewrite. Notice the first term, 3p squared, stays the same. The last term, minus 2, stays the same. And that middle, 5p, becomes 6p plus negative 1p. Now I group again, and I take 3p out of 3p squared plus 6p. I'm left with p plus 2. Then I have to get p plus 2 as a remaining binomial from this next group. So I have to take out a negative 1. That gets my signs what I want them to be, which is a positive p plus a positive 2. So I'm ready for my final answer. The 4 I factored out earlier times the repeating binomial, p plus 2, times what's left over, the 3p minus 1. Last example. You have to notice right away when you're asked to factor something if it's a binomial. We treat it the same at first. We take out the greatest common factor. Here we have a 3. Now we rewrite it. You have only been taught one way to factor a binomial. It's a perfect square minus another perfect square. How you have to factor it is take the square root of that first one. 9x squared is 3x. The square root of 4 is 2. And it's a repeating binomial with opposite operations. So we have the 3x minus 2 times the 3x plus 2. If we redouble distributed that, we'd get our 9x squared. We'd get a positive 6x minus a 6x in the middle, and those would eliminate each other, and we'd be left with a negative 4 or minus 4 on the end. And there's our 3 that we took out at the beginning, so there's your final answer. Be sure you're very well versed in each of these before you try to do your corrections for Chapter 8.